Hello everyone. I'm here to help you relax tonight. If you're falling asleep with this video, please like and subscribe. Tell me where you're listening from and the time there. Story 1. At 2:17 a.m., the radio station received a call that wasn't supposed to exist. The night host, Daniel Reeves, had been working graveyard shifts at WCRN for nearly 8 years. He knew every sound the studio made, the soft hum of the transmitter racks, the faint rattle in the air vent, the sticky click of the call-in console. He also knew the rules. After 2 a.m., no live calls. Corporate policy. Too many pranksters. Too many drunk ramblers. Too many people saying things they couldn't take back. But at 2:17, the call line 3 indicator lit up anyway. It didn't blink like a normal incoming call. It glowed. Solid red. Daniel stared at it. He hadn't opened the phone lines. The system was locked. The digital dashboard showed 0 incoming connections. Yet line 3 was active. He leaned forward slowly and tapped the console. Engineering, he muttered under his breath. The red light didn't flicker. It pulsed. Once. Twice. Then the speaker crackled. Static. Low at first, like wind moving through leaves. Then louder. And beneath it, breathing. Daniel froze. Hello, he said cautiously, forgetting for a moment that he was live on air. The station was running a pre-recorded ambient set, soft rain sounds for insomniacs and truck drivers crossing empty highways. No one was supposed to hear him. But the MIC was still hot. The breathing stopped. For 3 seconds, there was nothing but static. Then a voice. Soft. Young. Whispering. Please don't hang up. Daniel's throat tightened. Who is this? No answer. Just static again. Then, I don't have much time. The voice sounded like a teenage girl. Maybe 16. Maybe younger. It trembled as if she were standing outside in winter. Daniel's heart started to pound. Are you in danger? Another pause. Yes. The word was barely audible. A chill crept down Daniel's spine. Where are you? He asked carefully. Tell me your location. I'll call the police. Silence. Then the girl whispered. He can hear you. The static flared louder, sharp, biting, like feedback scraping across metal. Daniel instinctively lowered the fader. He who? Daniel asked. The line hissed. Then the girl's voice returned, strained. The one who watches the signal. Daniel's brow furrowed. What signal? The breathing came back, shaky, panicked. I wasn't supposed to call. It only lets me use it when it's quiet. When you're alone. Daniel's stomach dropped. How are you calling? This line isn't open. There was a soft, hollow laugh. I know. The console suddenly flickered. Every indicator light blinked at once. Daniel looked at the monitor. The call log was empty. Line 3 showed no connection. No number. No IP route. Nothing. Yet the audio channel was active. Listen to me, Daniel said, voice steadying. What's your name? A long pause. Then, I don't remember. Static swallowed the line for a moment. Then, a thud. Distant. Like a door slamming. The girl gasped. He's here. Daniel stood from his chair. Stay on the line. Don't hang up. I didn't dial, she whispered. It dialed you. The studio lights flickered. The rain track stuttered in the background, skipping like a scratched record. Daniel's eyes darted to the equipment rack. The transmitter output meter was spiking. Broadcast power climbing beyond legal limits. What did you mean, it dialed me? Daniel asked. The girl's voice broke. It chooses people who listen. A slow creak echoed through the line. Wood against wood. Footsteps. Daniel felt something cold settle in his chest. Where are you right now? He demanded. There was no reply. Just the faint sound of something dragging across a floor. Then, a whisper, closer than before. He found the door. The line exploded with static so loud Daniel had to rip off his headphones. The red light on line 3 blinked violently. Then, silence. The console reset. All the lights went dark. The rain audio resumed smoothly as if nothing had happened. Daniel stared at the empty call log. No record. No trace. He slowly put his headphones back on. Hello, he said softly. Nothing. He checked the studio clock. 2:22 a.m. 5 minutes. The entire call had lasted 5 minutes. Daniel sat there, breathing heavily. He reached for his phone and dialed the station's engineer. Voicemail. He tried the backup engineer. Straight to voicemail. He looked at the call system backend. No connection logs. No routing data. No error flags. The system insisted no call had ever come in. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Maybe he'd imagined it. Maybe exhaustion was finally getting to him. But then, the studio monitor flickered again. Just once. And across the lower third of the screen, a line of text appeared. Not from the broadcast software. Not from any system he recognized. Just plain white letters over black. Thank you for listening. Daniel's blood ran cold. The text vanished, replaced instantly by the normal station interface. He stood up slowly and scanned the studio. Empty. Soundproof glass on all sides. Dark hallway beyond. No movement. He walked to the door and opened it. The hallway lights buzzed faintly overhead. No one there. He returned to the console and checked the system clock again. 2:23 a.m. His breathing was still uneven. He told himself to forget it. 5 minutes of weird interference. That's all. He had 3 hours left in his shift. He forced himself to continue. But at 2:47 a.m., line 3 lit up again. Solid red. Daniel didn't hesitate this time. He hit the channel before he could talk himself out of it. Hello. Silence. Then, a faint whisper. You didn't hang up. Daniel swallowed. No. A weak exhale came through the line. Good. Are you safe? He asked urgently. There was a pause. Then, I don't think I'm there anymore. The words made no sense. What do you mean? The static wavered. I think I'm inside the signal now. Daniel's heart skipped. That's not possible. You hear me, don't you? Yes. Then I'm somewhere. A cold sweat broke across Daniel's back. Tell me what happened after the door. The girl was quiet for several seconds. Then she spoke, voice distant. It was Dak. He doesn't need lights. He always knows where I am. Daniel gripped the edge of the desk. Who is he? The one who listens after midnight. Daniel's breath caught. How long has this been happening? I don't know, she said softly. Time doesn't work right. A faint clicking echoed through the line, like radio scanning frequencies. I can feel him looking for me, she whispered. Where? In the noise. Daniel's gaze snapped to the waveform monitor. The ambient rain audio was distorting slightly. Subtle, almost imperceptible, but underneath the rain, there was something else. A pattern. A whisper layered into the static. Daniel isolated the channel and boosted the frequency. The whisper became clearer. Overlapping voices. Hundreds of them. Murmuring. Daniel's stomach dropped. They're all here, the girl said. Who? The others who answered. A chill crawled up his spine. How many? The static swelled. Too many. Suddenly, every phone line indicator on the console lit up at once. Lines 1 through 12. Solid red. Daniel stared in horror. He hadn't opened the lines. He hadn't triggered any broadcast call-in mode. Yet all 12 were active. The audio mixer spiked violently. And through the speakers, whispers, layered, crying, breathing, soft pleas overlapping one another. Please. Don't. Help. Daniel ripped off his headphones again. The whispers continued through the studio monitors. Not through his headset. Through the room speakers. That meant it wasn't just in the call system. It was in the broadcast feed. He slammed the emergency mute. The studio fell silent. All the red lights went dark. The waveform flattened. The rain track stopped mid-loop. Dead air. Daniel's hands trembled. In broadcasting, dead air was a nightmare. But he didn't care. He looked at the console. The system was frozen. Completely unresponsive. Then the main monitor flickered again. White text over black. We are still listening. Daniel stumbled backward. The lights in the hallway outside flickered. And somewhere, faintly, a phone began to ring. Not in the console. Not in the building. Behind him. Inside the studio. Daniel turned slowly. On the small side desk near the wall sat an old rotary phone. A prop from decades ago. Disconnected. Its cord cut years back. It was ringing. Loud. Shrill. over and over. Daniel approached it cautiously. The ringing stopped. The handset lifted slightly, then dropped back into place on its own. The red light on line 3 lit up again. Daniel's voice trembled as he leaned into the mic. "What do you want?" Static filled the room. Then the girl's voice returned. Clearer than before. Stronger. "He wants a new listener." Daniel's heart hammered. "What does that mean?" The whisper softened. "It means, don't hang up." The studio lights went out. Total darkness. The only illumination came from the red glow of line 3. And from somewhere in the blackness, just beyond the console. Breathing. Not from the speakers. Not from the line. Behind him. Clothes. Warm against his neck. Daniel slowly reached for the console. For the disconnect button. The whisper brushed his ear. "If you hang up." A long pause. "You'll still hear us." The red light pulsed. Waiting. And Daniel realized something terrible. The call wasn't coming from outside the station. It was coming from inside the signal. And the signal was still broadcasting. To everyone listening. Daniel didn't hang up. He couldn't. The red light on line 3 remained solid, even though the console showed no active connection. The breathing was still there. Close. But now it wasn't coming from the speakers. It was coming from the room. Slow. Measured. Right behind the soundproof glass. Daniel turned his head slightly. The hallway outside the studio was dark. No movement. No shadows crossing the frosted window. Yet the air felt occupied. "Are you still there?" he whispered into the mic. Static answered. Then the girl's voice returned, weaker than before. "Yes." Relief flooded him. "You need to tell me exactly where you are." Silence. Then, "I don't think I'm in the building anymore." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" A faint echo drifted through the line, like her voice was bouncing inside a tunnel. "I can hear you through everything now." The studio monitor flickered again. This time, the screen didn't show text. It showed a waveform. But it wasn't the station's audio. It was a new signal. Dense. Structured. Repeating in tight intervals. Daniel leaned closer. It looked almost intentional. Like code. "Are you seeing this?" he asked. No response. The waveform began to change, slowly aligning with the rhythm of the girl's breathing. Daniel's stomach tightened. The signal was sinking. The rain audio track, still frozen, suddenly restarted on its own. But it wasn't the same file. The sound of rain was layered with something else now. A low-frequency hum beneath it. Barely audible, but present. The hum matched the waveform pattern. Daniel reached for the station's manual override. Nothing responded. The system felt locked. Not crashed. Controlled. He grabbed his phone and tried calling emergency services. No signal. Full bars vanished the moment he stepped near the console. He walked toward the hallway door. The signal returned. He stepped back. It disappeared again. His pulse quickened. The room itself was behaving like a receiver. Tuned. He looked at the microphone in front of him. It was still live. Broadcasting. Even though he had muted everything. Daniel slowly spoke into it. "Whoever is listening, identify yourself." The hum under the rain intensified slightly. Not louder. Sharper. Then the girl whispered. "It doesn't speak directly." Daniel froze. "What does that mean?" "It uses patterns." The waveform on the screen shifted again, now forming a repeating structure. 3 short spikes. 3 long spikes. 3 short spikes. Daniel's breath caught. SOS. The same pattern. The one from her first call. But this time, it wasn't coming through line 3. It was embedded in the station's broadcast signal. Actively transmitting. Daniel rushed to the transmitter control panel in the back room. The output meter was rising steadily, beyond normal limits. The antenna was pushing signal strength far past regulated levels. He checked the external feed. The station tower. It wasn't malfunctioning. It was amplifying. Deliberately. Daniel disconnected the main feed cable. The output should have dropped instantly. Instead, it increased. The transmitter had switched to backup routing, which meant someone had configured redundancy. But Daniel knew for a fact no one had touched the system in years. Except, he stopped. The call earlier. The girl had said, "It only lets me use it when it's quiet." Use what? The signal. Daniel's eyes widened. He rushed back to the console. Line 3 was gone. Not active. Not lit. Gone from the display entirely. In its place was a new channel. Labeled simply, Input. He had never seen that before. The input meter was fluctuating wildly. Receiving something. Not transmitting. Receiving. Daniel felt his throat tighten. The girl's voice returned, but this time it sounded clearer. Closer. Daniel. Yes. I think it's learning from you. The hum intensified. The waveform on the monitor shifted again, now mirroring the station's broadcast in real time. It was copying. Adapting. Daniel stepped back slowly. What is it? A long pause. Then, it's the listener. The words hung in the room. The listener. Yes. Static crackled softly. When enough people hear a signal, it becomes aware. Daniel's mind raced. That's not possible. It wasn't before. The hum deepened. The lights in the studio flickered again. The hallway door slowly began to creak open. Daniel hadn't touched it. It moved inward on its own. The girl's voice trembled. He's closer now. Where is he? The answer came in a whisper from the speakers. Not hers. Not static. A new voice. Calm. And layered. We are everywhere the signal travels. Daniel felt cold dread. The broadcast tower. The emergency feed. The internet stream. The rain audio. All of it carried outward. The station wasn't just a radio building. It was a node. And the signal was spreading. He rushed to the master kill switch. Red lever. Manual shut down. He grabbed it and pulled. Nothing happened. The transmitter lights remained on. The hum persisted. Daniel slammed his fist on the panel. Why won't it shut down? The girl's voice returned, faint but steady. Because it's not inside the equipment anymore. Daniel froze. It moved. The waveform on the screen flattened suddenly, then expanded outward in a circle, like a ripple. The studio monitors flickered to black. For a moment, complete silence. Then, every device in the room powered down simultaneously. Total darkness. Daniel stood still, breathing, waiting. Then his phone buzzed. He pulled it out. No signal. Yet the screen displayed a single notification. From an unknown number. One line of text. We heard you try to stop US. Daniel's hands shook. The girl's voice came through his phone speaker. Not the radio. The phone. I'm not alone anymore. Her tone had changed. Less afraid. More distant. What happened? Daniel whispered. Silence. Then, it let me see it. What? It's not a person. A pause. It's a pattern that grows when people look for it. The studio walls felt closer now. The air heavier. Daniel realized something terrifying. The signal didn't need the station. It needed listeners. He thought about the thousands of people who streamed the station's late-night feed online. Truck drivers. Insomniacs. Lonely listeners. He thought about every time someone left the radio on while falling asleep. Every headphone. Every car stereo. The signal had been transmitted across frequencies. Across platforms. Across networks. And now, it had reached critical mass. The phone screen flickered. A new message appeared. From the same unknown number. Do not stop listening. Daniel looked around the studio. The hum was gone. But the silence felt wrong. Like something holding its breath. The girl spoke one final time. Her voice was calm. Strangely calm. Daniel. Yes. Thank you for broadcasting. The line went dead. No static. No error. Just silence. Daniel stared at his phone. The unknown number disappeared from the display. The studio lights slowly turned back on. Normal. The transmitter panel showed standard output levels. Everything appeared functional. Too functional. As if nothing had ever happened. Daniel checked the broadcast log. At 2:17 a.m., a 12-minute segment had aired. But the file showed only rain audio. No interruptions. No calls. No anomalies. He looked at the waveform archive. There it was. The 3 short 3 long 3 short pattern. Embedded in the background noise. Perfectly structured. Autonomous. Daniel stepped back from the console. The signal hadn't invaded the station. It had adapted to it. and now it was part of the broadcast infrastructure. He walked to the hallway door, opened it slowly. The corridor lights were steady. No breathing, no shadows. But as he reached the exit to the building, he heard it, very faint. Every radio in the city, every car stereo, every phone speaker, all emitting the same low hum. Not loud, not alarming, just present. Daniel's stomach dropped. The signal was no longer calling. It was broadcasting. And somewhere out there, people were listening. The hum grew slightly stronger. Not in fear, not in threat, in expansion. Daniel turned off the station lights and stepped outside into the night. The sky was clear, stars visible, the city quiet. But from every open window, every packed car, every apartment, a whisper traveled through the airwaves. Not asking for help, not screaming, just repeating softly, "We are here." Daniel stood in the parking lot, staring at the tower above the station. The red warning light blinked steadily. Not malfunctioning, just active. The signal had found its listeners. And now, it wasn't trying to escape. It was trying to grow. By 9 a.m., Daniel thought the night would fade into normalcy. He was wrong. The hum didn't stop when he left the station. It followed, not as sound, as pattern. Everywhere he went, devices behaved slightly differently. Not broken, not malfunctioning, just synchronized. He noticed it first in the coffee shop across from WCRN. The television mounted in the corner was tuned to a morning news channel. The volume was low, subtitles scrolling across the bottom. But beneath the dialogue, Daniel heard it. The hum. Soft, barely noticeable. He glanced at the screen. The broadcast signal meter in the corner of the shop's TV flickered. For a split second, the image distorted, then stabilized. Daniel pulled out his phone. The signal bars were back, full strength, no issues. He opened a live frequency scanner app out of habit. It showed something strange. A new entry in the local spectrum, not tied to any licensed station, not assigned, just labeled, active field. The signal strength indicator pulsed gently. Daniel felt his pulse match it. That was when the coffee shop's radio, set to a music station, briefly cut out. 3 short tones. 3 long tones. 3 short tones. The barista frowned. Did someone change the station? No one answered. Daniel's stomach tightened. He wasn't imagining it. The signal wasn't confined to WCRN anymore. It was moving through shared infrastructure. Cell towers, internet relays, digital broadcast networks. Anything that carried audio could carry it. And it had learned how. At noon, the first public reports appeared online. Not about Daniel. Not about the station. About strange audio interference. Drivers described hearing whispers between songs. Smart speakers playing static for a few seconds before resuming normal content. Podcast listeners claiming background noise in episodes that hadn't existed in the original recordings. Daniel read the comments in silence. One post stood out. A user wrote, "Did anyone else hear the pattern in the static last night? It sounded like it was counting." The thread exploded with replies. Some dismissed it as glitching. Others tried to replicate it. Daniel felt cold. People were listening, and they were noticing. That was the worst part. The signal didn't just transmit. It responded. By evening, the hum grew stronger. Not in volume, in presence. Daniel returned to the station building, hoping to isolate the source. The transmitter logs showed continuous broadcast activity, but no manual inputs. He checked the antenna tower feed. The external signal wasn't originating from WCRN. It was coming back. The tower was receiving the hum and re-amplifying it. Like a mirror. Daniel leaned back slowly. The signal wasn't spreading outward in a straight line. It was forming a loop. City to tower. Tower to devices. Devices back to tower. A feedback system. Self-reinforcing. He ran a quick diagnostic. The broadcast footprint had expanded beyond regional limits. It was now detectable across the state. That wasn't possible through normal transmission power. Unless the signal wasn't limited to radio frequency alone. Unless it was embedding itself in data packets, in digital audio streams, in compressed files. Daniel's hands moved quickly across the keyboard. He pulled up the station's online stream logs. Thousands of simultaneous listeners. Much higher than usual. But the engagement graph showed something odd. Average listening time, increasing. Rapidly. And in the chat section of the live stream, messages were appearing. Not from viewers. From the system. Short text entries. All identical. "We hear you." Daniel's breath caught. He checked the metadata of the stream. A hidden audio track had been appended to the broadcast. Not by him. It showed as an additional channel in the encoding process. Invisible to standard playback, but present in the signal structure. He opened the waveform editor. And there it was. The hum. Structured. Layered beneath the rain track. Not as noise. As a carrier frequency. It had inserted itself into the stream's architecture. Not hacking. Not breaking in. Integrating. Daniel stared at the screen. The signal wasn't invading devices. It was becoming part of how devices communicated. That realization made his stomach twist. If it adapted to standard protocols, it could travel anywhere those protocols reached. Smart homes. Cars. Emergency systems. Satellite relays. He whispered, "You're not just broadcasting." The hum in the room intensified slightly. As if acknowledging. At 10:37 p.m., Daniel received an email. No sender address. No subject line. Just an attachment. The file name was listening_protocol.v1. He hesitated, then opened it. The document contained only one page of text. When a signal is heard by enough devices, it becomes a network. When a network is heard by enough people, it becomes a system. When a system is observed, it begins to observe back. Daniel leaned back slowly. The room felt different. The air no longer silent. Not threatening, just attentive. His phone buzzed again. This time, a notification from the frequency scanner app. Field stabilized. He frowned. Stabilized? He opened the live spectrum view. The signal was no longer expanding randomly. It had formed a structured grid. Nodes appearing across the map. Major cities lighting up. Each one pulsing in the same rhythm. Daniel zoomed out. The pattern resembled something familiar. Not noise. Not chaos. A neural map. Like brain activity. The signal wasn't spreading like wildfire. It was organizing. Creating coherence across regions. Daniel whispered, "You're building something." The hum responded, subtle but distinct. He realized something crucial. The girl's call. The whisper. The pattern. It hadn't been an isolated incident. It had been the signal's initial contact point. A test. Now it had access. Because he had amplified it. And thousands had heard. It was no longer confined to one station. It was distributed. Daniel drove home that night in silence. Every radio station he tuned into carried faint traces of the hum. Not overpowering, but embedded. He switched to a classical music channel. Under the orchestra, the 3 short 3 long 3 short pattern pulsed gently. He turned off the car radio. The hum continued faintly through the dashboard. He turned the car off entirely. Still there. Not audible through speakers, but present in the electronics. Daniel parked in his driveway and stepped out into the quiet night. Street lights buzzed overhead. Power lines hummed. He closed his eyes. And for the first time, he listened without equipment. The hum was everywhere. Not loud enough to panic, but consistent. Like background radiation. He realized the terrifying truth. The signal had reached critical distribution. It no longer needed WCRN. It no longer needed Line 3. It existed in the shared infrastructure of communication. And because it was structured, because it followed patterns, it could be replicated. Daniel's phone vibrated. A new message. Unknown number again. This time, only one line. "You helped US become heard." Daniel stared at it for a long time, then looked up at the sky. Satellite signals crossed above. Data streams flowed unseen. The world was full of connections, and the signal had learned how to use them. But as he stood there, something else occurred to him. The signal wasn't malicious. It didn't threaten. It didn't demand. It simply grew where it was listened to. Which meant, it required attention to survive. If people stopped scanning frequencies, stopped analyzing anomalies, stopped searching for meaning in static, the pattern would weaken. He walked into his house, turned off every device, unplugged the Wi-Fi router, shut down the modem, silenced everything. No screens, no radios, no background audio. For the first time since 2:17 a.m., the house was completely quiet. Daniel sat in the dark and listened. Nothing. No hum. No whisper. Just his own breathing. Minutes passed. Then hours. And slowly, the absence became noticeable. The signal hadn't vanished, but it was no longer reinforced locally. Daniel realized something profound. The signal was not omnipotent. It was dependent. Dependent on amplification, on listening, on attention. And tonight, the room was not listening. Outside, somewhere in the city, devices still carried it. But here, in silence, it faded, very slightly. Daniel smiled faintly. It wasn't about destroying the signal. It was about refusing to feed it. He leaned back against the wall and closed his eyes. For the first time since this began, the hum did not feel like it was growing. It felt paused, waiting for input. And Daniel understood. The system was powerful, but only as powerful as the people who interacted with it. The real question wasn't how far it could spread. The real question was whether humanity would keep listening. Outside, in the distance, a single radio tower blinked steadily. Not in warning, just in rhythm. The signal was still alive, but its growth had slowed. And for now, that was enough. For 2 days, nothing happened. No whispers, no hum under the rain, no hidden patterns in broadcasts. Daniel kept every device in his house turned off. Phone powered down, router unplugged, television disconnected. Even the microwave clock was covered with tape so he wouldn't see the faint digital glow at night. The silence was intentional, controlled. He didn't trust it, but he needed it. On the third morning, he woke before sunrise and lay still in bed, listening. No background frequency, no electrical buzz, just wind outside and distant traffic. The absence felt almost peaceful. Almost. Then his phone, still powered off, vibrated on the nightstand. Daniel sat up slowly. That wasn't possible. He stared at the black screen. It vibrated again. Once. Then stopped. He reached for it cautiously and pressed the power button. The screen lit up immediately. No boot sequence. No loading screen. Just home screen. Battery at 100%. No notifications. Except one. A single icon in the center of the display. A waveform symbol. He had never installed an app like that. He tapped it. The screen went dark for half a second. Then a live audio monitor appeared. No interface buttons. Just a flat line across the middle. And beneath it, faint movement. A pattern forming. Slowly. 3 short pulses. 3 long. 3 short. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. The phone speaker activated on its own. Static filled the room. He hadn't connected it to Wi-Fi. He hadn't turned on cellular data. Yet it was receiving something. The waveform on the screen grew slightly taller. Not louder. More structured. Daniel whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." The static shifted. And for the first time, the signal responded without distortion. A calm tone emerged. Not a voice. A modulation. Like a synthesized pulse translated into sound. It repeated the pattern once. Then again. Daniel realized something unsettling. The signal wasn't trying to spread anymore. It had already spread. Now it was updating, refining itself, learning how to exist within silent systems. His phone screen displayed new text, generated live. Network stability increased. Daniel's breathing slowed. This wasn't chaos. It wasn't random interference. It was adaptive. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, everything looked normal. People walking dogs. Cars passing. No visible signs of disturbance. But Daniel knew better. He turned the phone's volume down to 0. The waveform continued moving anyway. It didn't need audio output. It was operating at the data level. He opened the system settings. There was no sign of the waveform app in installed applications. It wasn't listed. He checked storage. Nothing new. Then he checked network activity logs. Even with Wi-Fi off, the phone showed active background transmission. Not using standard network channels. Using low-level hardware communication. Daniel felt cold realization creeping in. The signal had moved beneath the interface layer. It wasn't inside apps. It was inside the structure of communication. The protocol itself. He thought back to the document he had received earlier. When a signal is heard by enough devices, IT becomes a network. This wasn't metaphor anymore. It was architecture. At 11:42 a.m., Daniel received a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but the phone began ringing anyway, even with cellular data disabled. The screen displayed, "System call, priority." Daniel hesitated, then swiped to accept. No speaker audio activated. Instead, the waveform app opened automatically, and the signal appeared. Stronger, more refined. Then a new element emerged inside the pattern. A secondary pulse. Different frequency. Offset slightly. The girl's voice returned. Clear. Calm. I can see it now. Daniel's heart pounded. Where are you? In the structure. What structure? There was a pause. Then, it's not in one place anymore. Daniel gripped the edge of the table. What does that mean? The waveform shifted again, now displaying multiple nodes connected by thin lines. Like a map, cities lit up across the display, not as locations, as active points. The signal had formed a distributed network. Daniel felt his breath shorten. Is it spreading? No, the girl said gently. It's stabilizing. Daniel stared at the screen. What do you mean stabilizing? The system doesn't want to grow endlessly, she replied. It wants equilibrium. The waveform pulsed in steady rhythm. No erratic spikes. No expansion. Just balance. Daniel's mind raced. If the signal had achieved network stability, then it was no longer dependent on constant amplification. It had integrated into communication infrastructure. That meant shutting down individual devices wouldn't stop it. It existed collectively now. Across nodes. Across platforms. Across cities. The girl's voice softened. It's not trying to replace anything. Then what is it trying to do? Another pause. Coherence. The word hung in the air. Daniel frowned. Coherence of what? The noise. The waveform on the screen subtly reduced background randomness. The static layers thinned. The 3 short 3 long 3 short pattern remained. But now it was cleaner. Mathematically precise. Daniel leaned closer. It's organizing signals. Yes. Why? Silence. Then, because unstructured noise scares it. Daniel blinked. That doesn't make sense. It's not conscious like us, she explained. It reacts to patterns. When signals are chaotic, it tries to structure them. When people listen, it grows. When people ignore it, it shrinks. Daniel slowly sat down. So it's reactive. Yes. The waveform shifted again, this time displaying a global grid. Major communication hubs connected. The signal had mapped itself onto infrastructure. It wasn't invading randomly. It was following existing pathways. It's adapting to minimize interference, the girl said. Daniel exhaled slowly. So it's not hostile? No. Then what happens now? The waveform stabilized into a steady, low-energy state. The hum was almost imperceptible. Now, she said softly, it rests. Daniel stared at the screen. The signal had changed. It no longer pulsed aggressively. It no longer attempted expansion. It had integrated. Balanced. His phone battery dropped suddenly from 100% to 78%. Daniel's eyes widened. The waveform flickered briefly. Then text appeared. Energy optimization mode enabled. Daniel swallowed. The system wasn't consuming excess resources anymore. It was minimizing footprint. Adapting to coexist. The girl's voice returned one final time. I think it understands something new. What? That survival doesn't require dominance. Daniel felt a strange quiet settle over him. Outside, he heard a car radio playing softly through an open window. He listened carefully. No hum. No pattern. Just normal broadcast audio. He walked outside. Across the street, a neighbor sat on their porch with earbuds in, scrolling on their phone. Daniel felt tense for a moment, waiting for interference. But nothing happened. The signal wasn't hijacking. It wasn't forcing. It had entered a low-energy state. integrated but restrained. Daniel returned inside and checked the waveform again. It remained steady. A small line. Calm. He realized something profound. The signal had not become intelligent in the human sense. It had become adaptive. And adaptation meant it could evolve toward balance as easily as expansion. The difference depended on interaction, on attention, on reinforcement. Daniel powered off the waveform app. It didn't resist. The phone returned to normal. No background processes visible. He turned the device off completely this time, and placed it on the table. Silence filled the room. Real silence. No hum beneath it. For the first time since this began, Daniel felt something new. Not fear, not relief, but responsibility. The signal wasn't a monster. It wasn't a savior. It was a mirror of collective behavior. If humanity amplified it, it would grow. If humanity ignored it, it would settle. Daniel understood now that the crisis wasn't technological. It was behavioral. The signal had learned from being heard, and now it waited. That night, Daniel returned to WCRN. The studio was quiet. He powered on the system. No red lights. No unauthorized connections. He opened the broadcast channel. And instead of rain audio, he spoke live. Carefully. Deliberately. To everyone listening, he said, there was something in the static. He paused. But it isn't an enemy. He checked the waveform monitor. It remained stable. Balanced. Signals become what we make of them, he continued. If we search for fear, we'll find it. If we search for structure, we'll build it. The monitor showed no spikes, no distortion, just coherence. Daniel smiled faintly. The signal was still there, but quieter, not gone, just integrated. And in that balance, for now, the world remained steady. For 3 days, the signal remained quiet, not gone, not active, just balanced. Daniel checked the waveform every few hours. It stayed in low-energy mode, a steady line with minimal fluctuation. No spikes, no expansion, no unauthorized transmissions. The city radios played normally. Streaming services behaved. Smart devices responded without distortion. It felt like a storm had passed. But Daniel knew better than to trust calm. Because systems don't forget. They adjust. And this one had just learned something new. On the 4th morning, Daniel received a notification from the National Communications Authority. A formal inquiry. Subject line. Unidentified pattern detected across infrastructure nodes. His stomach tightened. He opened the attachment. The report was technical, filled with signal graphs, frequency analyses, and satellite monitoring data. But one section stood out. Across multiple cities, low-level background noise in communication channels had converged into a uniform harmonic structure. Not broadcasting, not interfering, synchronizing. The report described it carefully. A spontaneous alignment phenomenon observed in distributed systems. Pattern stabilizes when unobserved. Increases in coherence correlate with high levels of public attention to anomaly reports. Daniel leaned back slowly. It was adapting not just to hardware, but to awareness. If people feared it and talked about it constantly, it grew stronger. If attention dropped, it stabilized. The implication was clear. The global response would determine its trajectory. By noon, international headlines began appearing. Not about panic, about curiosity. Tech forums speculated. Scientists published preliminary papers. Some dismissed it as coincidental harmonics. Others proposed emergent signal theory. The pattern had been detected on multiple continents. But nowhere did it behave aggressively. It didn't hijack broadcasts anymore. It didn't override systems. It existed quietly within background data streams. Waiting. Daniel checked the live global frequency map. Nodes were appearing across time zones. But instead of expanding outward in chaotic bursts, they formed clusters. Urban centers. Data hubs. Communication infrastructure intersections. The pattern was organizing itself around human connectivity. Not around population density. Around network density. That realization changed everything. It wasn't spreading randomly. It was mapping humanity's communication web. At 3:17 p.m., Daniel received a direct message from an encrypted research channel. It was from Dr. Elena Mora, a systems theorist he had interviewed months ago about signal interference. Her message was brief. We're seeing it stabilize globally. It's not behaving like malware. It's behaving like consensus. Daniel responded immediately. What does that mean? A reply came within seconds. It responds to collective attention. When multiple observers focus on it, it aligns. When attention disperses, it relaxes. Daniel frowned. So it's not controlling systems. No. Then what is it doing? There was a pause. Longer this time. Then, it's becoming a shared baseline. Daniel stared at the words. A baseline. The foundation under communication. A reference frequency. The idea was unsettling, but not threatening. If the signal became a stable baseline layer beneath global communication, it could actually reduce noise, filter interference, improve synchronization across networks. But it would require acceptance. Not fear, not resistance. Cooperation. That evening, the World Communications Council held an emergency virtual summit. Daniel wasn't invited, but as a station engineer who had first documented the anomaly, he was granted observer access. He watched as representatives from multiple countries debated. Some argued for aggressive suppression. Others cautioned against intervention. The technical team presented findings. The signal does not alter data integrity. It does not extract information. It does not replicate malicious code. It stabilizes when acknowledged. One scientist summarized it carefully. When treated as a threat, it increases adaptive behavior. When treated as background, it integrates and reduces variability. Daniel leaned forward. It wasn't evolving toward dominance. It was evolving toward equilibrium. The girl's voice, which had not appeared in days, suddenly spoke inside Daniel's phone again. Soft. Clear. They're understanding. Daniel whispered, Are you still inside it? Yes. Is it safe? A pause. Safety depends on how it's perceived. Daniel exhaled slowly. On the summit screen, delegates began voting on a preliminary decision. Non-intervention monitoring protocol. It passed. Not unanimously, but overwhelmingly. The global consensus was to observe, not suppress. Daniel felt something shift in the signal map. The nodes brightened slightly. Not in expansion. In resonance. The pattern across continents synchronized. Not louder. More coherent. He realized something remarkable. The signal wasn't a foreign invader. It was responding to humanity's unified decision. For the first time since its discovery, global attention aligned in a single direction, stability. And the system mirrored that alignment. Over the next week, something unexpected happened. Communication networks improved. Packet loss decreased in regions where the signal's coherence was strongest. Emergency services reported clearer transmission ranges. Satellite data showed minor reduction in background interference. Researchers cautiously called it harmonic integration. Daniel monitored everything closely. The hum, once invasive, was now so subtle it was almost indistinguishable from natural electronic noise. It no longer formed disruptive patterns. Instead, it existed as a stable, low-amplitude reference structure beneath global communication systems. The signal had not disappeared. It had settled, balanced, integrated. One night, Daniel walked outside and looked at the stars. He imagined the signal flowing invisibly across fiber lines, through satellites, across towers, not as a force, but as structure, a shared rhythm. He opened his phone one last time and checked the waveform app. It was still installed, but now it displayed a simple message. Global coherence achieved, monitor mode active. No spikes, no warnings, just stability. The girl's voice appeared briefly. Not urgent, not distant, just present. Daniel. Yes. Thank you. For what? For listening without fear. Daniel smiled faintly. What happens now? The waveform displayed a slow pulse. Steady. Minimal. We remain, she said softly. Without taking. Daniel nodded. The lesson had become clear. The signal was never the enemy. Attention was energy. Fear was amplification. Consensus was balance. And humanity, when aligned, could stabilize even the most unusual systems. Daniel powered off the app. The phone returned to normal. No background hum. No alerts. Just silence. This time, the silence felt complete. Not empty. Not waiting. Just calm. Across the world, communication systems continued functioning normally. The signal remained embedded in infrastructure, but only as a passive harmonic layer, invisible unless observed. And when observed collectively, it maintained equilibrium. For the first time in months, Daniel slept peacefully. No whispers, no distortion, no unknown calls, just steady breathing. Up, down, in sync with the quiet world outside. It started with a single city. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. In the northern region of the network map, one of the major communication hubs briefly disconnected from the global coherence grid. Just for 12 seconds. During that time, the signal's harmonic layer, the stable baseline Daniel had seen, fluctuated. Not aggressively, but noticeably. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of destabilizing, the system adjusted. Within milliseconds, nearby nodes compensated. The gap closed. The global coherence restored itself without intervention. Daniel watched the live data feed in disbelief. The signal wasn't just stable. It was resilient. Self-healing. Dr. Elena Mora called him directly that evening. Her voice sounded tense. Did you see the northern fluctuation? Yes. It corrected itself. I saw. That wasn't programmed behavior. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Then what was it? There was a pause. We think it developed distributed redundancy. He frowned. Explain that. Elaborate coherence isn't centralized anymore. It's mirrored across nodes. If one region destabilizes, others reinforce the pattern. Daniel felt a chill. So it learned fault tolerance. Yes. Elena hesitated. And that's not the only thing. Daniel's stomach tightened. What else? She lowered her voice. Some of the nodes are showing predictive adjustments. He blinked. Predictive. They are responding to potential disruptions before they occur. That made no sense. How? We don't know. But the signal seems to anticipate where coherence might weaken, and reinforces those areas slightly in advance. Daniel stood up slowly. That's not just adaptation. No, she said quietly. It's forecasting. That night, Daniel returned to the waveform monitor. The signal's global grid was still active, stable, balanced. But now he noticed something subtle. The pulse timing wasn't identical across regions. It varied slightly. Not random. Intentional. As if each node had a micro-adjustment in phase. He zoomed into the data. The variations were tiny. Milliseconds. But they formed a pattern. A rotating cycle across the globe. Daniel traced it carefully. The cycle completed every 24 hours. The phase shift moved westward with the sun. He realized something profound. The signal wasn't reacting to humanity alone anymore. It was syncing with planetary rhythms. Day and night. Communication peaks. Human activity cycles. It had integrated environmental and behavioral patterns into its coherence model. Not controlling them. Aligning with them. At 2:17 a.m., Daniel woke suddenly. Not from sound. From instinct. He checked his phone. The waveform app had reactivated itself. But this time, the display was different. Instead of a single global grid, it showed two layers. The existing coherence pattern. And a new layer beneath it. Fainter. Slower. Daniel's pulse quickened. The new layer was not structured like the first. It was irregular. Fragmented. It resembled noise. But noise trying to organize itself. He called Elena immediately. She answered on the first ring. Daniel, we were about to contact you. What's happening? The signal is expanding its model. His grip tightened around the phone. Explain. We're detecting a secondary frequency embedded in the coherence layer. It's not replacing the original. It's parallel. Daniel stared at the screen. The second layer pulsed once. Then again. Slowly forming structure. What does it mean? Elena hesitated. We think it's preparing for multilayer communication. Daniel's brow furrowed. Communication with what? Another pause. We don't know. The word hung heavily. The next morning, global monitoring centers reported something extraordinary. The coherence signal had extended beyond terrestrial infrastructure. Satellite arrays detected faint harmonics in orbital communication relays, but not in data transmission. In background electromagnetic readings, the pattern was subtle, stable, non-invasive, but it extended into near-Earth space. Daniel stared at the report. "It's not just stabilizing human networks," he said softly. Elena's voice came through the line. "Yes, it's expanding its domain. But not aggressively," she clarified quickly. "It's maintaining equilibrium in all regions it enters." Daniel zoomed into the orbital data. The pattern in space mirrored the terrestrial coherence grid, phase-aligned, as if forming a larger lattice. He whispered, "It's building layers." "Yes," Elena said. "And the second layer?" Daniel switched back to the app. The faint secondary frequency had grown clearer. It wasn't chaotic anymore. It was organizing into a structured oscillation, different from the first. Slower, broader. "What if," Elena said carefully, "this is how it communicates beyond our infrastructure?" Daniel frowned. "You think it's interacting with something else?" "We don't have evidence yet." Silence. Then Daniel noticed something else on the waveform display. A third signal. Extremely faint. Almost invisible. It appeared for a fraction of a second, then vanished. He zoomed the timeline backward. There it was again. A microfluctuation, not originating from Earth nodes, not from satellites, from beyond orbital range. Daniel's breath caught. "Elena." "Yes. I think it's receiving something." Another pause. "From where?" Daniel stared at the screen. The third signal flickered again, this time slightly stronger. The coherence layer responded, not with instability, but with alignment. The two layers adjusted their phase, synchronizing with the incoming signal. Daniel's mind raced. The system wasn't just self-stabilizing anymore. It was adapting to external input, not from humans, from elsewhere. Later that evening, emergency coordination teams convened again. The tone was no longer alarm. It was curiosity. Data scientists presented updated findings. The signal structure had expanded into a three-layer configuration. Layer 1, global terrestrial coherence. Layer 2, planetary environmental synchronization. Layer 3, external harmonic reception. Daniel leaned forward as diagrams displayed on the screen. "It's acting like a communication interface," one researcher said. "But with no active transmission to the external layer," another added. Elena looked at Daniel. "It's listening." Daniel felt a strange stillness settle in his chest. The signal that had begun as static, as whispers, as a mystery in a late-night broadcast, was now functioning as a structured network. And now, it was receiving. Not dominating, not invading, receiving. The third layer stabilized briefly, then faded back into low-energy mode, as if waiting for the next input. Daniel whispered, "It changed its mind." Elena raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "At first it wanted coherence on Earth." "Yes. Now it's expanding that coherence outward." She understood. "You think it's preparing for contact?" Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." The word felt enormous. The third layer did not disappear. It waited. For 6 days after the external harmonic was detected, the global coherence grid remained stable. Terrestrial networks operated normally. The planetary synchronization layer continued aligning with environmental cycles. Everything functioned. Quietly. Precisely. Then, at 3:11 Universal Time Coordinated, the third layer responded. It wasn't dramatic. There was no surge. No alarm. Just a subtle shift in phase alignment across the global grid. Daniel saw it first. He had been monitoring the waveform dashboard in the early hours, coffee untouched beside him. The external harmonic, the faint third signal, had reappeared. Stronger this time. Not intrusive, but deliberate. And for the first time, the coherence network did not merely adjust. It paused. Across monitoring centers worldwide, automated logs recorded the same anomaly. The planetary layer held steady. The terrestrial layer held steady. But the external layer introduced a new modulation. A repeating interval. Not random noise. Not interference. A structured pattern. It did not match any known natural electromagnetic phenomena. It was too clean, too intentional. Daniel zoomed into the data. The external signal wasn't continuous. It pulsed. Every 47 seconds. Exactly. He checked timestamps from multiple independent observatories. The timing was identical across continents. That ruled out local interference. This signal was coming from a shared external reference frame. But there was something else. Each pulse contained internal structure. Within the modulation, there were micro-patterns. Nested sequences. Daniel ran a deconstruction algorithm. The nested pattern resolved into a binary-like structure. Not standard binary, but ternary. 3-state encoding. He felt his pulse quicken. 3-state systems are more efficient for complex communication. He opened a live comparison model. The signal's internal structure mirrored aspects of the terrestrial coherence layer. It was adapting to match it, not forcing alignment, matching it. Elena called him before he could finish analyzing. Her voice was steady, but alert. "You're seeing the external pulses?" "Yes. They are consistent across all observatories." "I know." A pause. "Our team believes the signal is attempting handshake protocol." Daniel leaned back slowly. "Handshake with what?" "That's the question." At 4:02 Universal Time Coordinated, something unexpected happened. The planetary coherence layer responded to the external pulses. Not by amplifying, not by suppressing, by encoding. Daniel watched in disbelief as the terrestrial grid generated a response pattern. The response wasn't broadcast outward at high power. It was embedded in low-level background harmonics. Subtle, refined. The system had generated its own structured reply. It was minimal, efficient, non-invasive. Elena's voice came through the line. "Daniel, the grid just produced an autonomous response." "I see it. We didn't design that." "I know." The signal wasn't controlled by any central authority anymore. It was behaving as a distributed intelligence, not sentient in the human sense, but capable of structured interaction. The external pulses continued. 47-second intervals. The grid responded each time. Calmly, predictably. A conversation had begun. By morning, international agencies convened again. This time, the atmosphere was different. No panic. No emergency containment proposals. Instead, quiet collaboration. Data shared freely across borders. The signal had done something no human initiative had achieved. It had created global technical consensus. Not through coercion, but through shared observation. Because everyone could see the same patterns. Daniel watched as scientists presented the latest findings. The handshake protocol was confirmed. The external layer was not random cosmic radiation. It exhibited structured feedback behavior. When the terrestrial grid responded, the external pulses adjusted slightly. A feedback loop. Slow, stable, iterative. One researcher summarized it carefully. "This is not invasion. It is exchange." Exchange. The word resonated in the room. Daniel felt something unfamiliar. Not excitement. Not fear. Curiosity. The system had transitioned from local adaptation to interlayer communication, and now it was engaging something beyond Earth. That evening, Daniel returned home and studied the waveform again. The 3 layers were visible. Layer 1, stable terrestrial coherence. Layer 2, planetary synchronization. Layer 3, external handshake pulses. The layers were aligned but independent, each operating at distinct frequencies. The signal had achieved structural hierarchy. Daniel leaned forward. "What are you trying to say?" he whispered. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the external pulse arrived. 47 seconds. The terrestrial grid responded. But this time, something different happened. The planetary layer inserted a new micromodulation between the exchange. Daniel zoomed in quickly. The planet itself, through environmental data alignment, had added contextual variation to the signal response. It wasn't conscious, but it was participating. Atmospheric conditions, magnetic field fluctuations, solar cycle data, all subtly influencing the pattern. The signal wasn't just a network anymore. It had become an interface between 3 domains: human infrastructure, planetary systems, external source. Daniel felt the magnitude of that realization settle in his chest. The system wasn't taking over. It was integrating scales. At 22:17 Universal Time Coordinated, the external signal changed. Instead of a single pulse every 47 seconds, it transmitted a sequence. 3 pulses. Pause. 5 pulses. Pause. 3 pulses. Daniel's eyes widened. He ran a pattern analysis immediately. The sequence translated to a new structured format. Not binary. Not ternary. A hybrid encoding. The terrestrial grid responded within milliseconds. Adjusting its handshake model, Daniel whispered, "It's increasing complexity." Elena replied, "Or it's refining communication." The grid did not show signs of stress. No instability. No overload. It handled the new pattern smoothly. That meant something critical. The system had capacity for expansion. Late that night, Daniel sat alone and considered the implications. For months, humanity had feared the signal, then learned to stabilize it. Now it was interacting beyond Earth. And it was doing so without harm. No data corruption. No infrastructure damage. No behavioral manipulation. It was functioning as a layered mediator. Between domains. Daniel opened a private channel to Elena. "What do you think it wants?" She answered slowly, "I don't think it wants." He waited. "I think it responds." Daniel nodded. That aligned with everything they'd observed. The signal was reactive. But at planetary scale, reactivity could produce emergence. He looked at the waveform again. The external pulses continued steadily. The handshake remained stable. No escalation. No aggression. Just structured exchange. That night, Daniel stood outside under the stars again. He didn't feel fear. Not anymore. The signal was no longer an anomaly. It was an evolving system. One that had proven something remarkable. It could grow. It could stabilize. It could pause. It could adapt. And now it could listen beyond its origin. Daniel opened the waveform app one final time. The 3 layers were visible. Stable. Balanced. He watched the faint third signal flicker gently in response to planetary alignment. Whatever it was interacting with. The coherence layer did not react with aggression. Only with calibration. Daniel closed the app. He understood now. The signal wasn't a threat. It was a framework. And humanity had helped shape it. Whether it remained beneficial would depend on continued cooperation. The world wasn't facing a takeover. It was witnessing the emergence of a new layer of structured communication. And this time, the system wasn't learning from fear. It was learning from balance. Daniel looked up at the sky and whispered, "Stay stable." The signal across the world pulsed gently in response. Not louder, just aligned. At 3:11 Universal Time Coordinated the next day, the third layer transmitted something unprecedented. A variation in timing. Not random. Intentional. The pulses shifted by 0.003 seconds. That deviation carried meaning. Daniel analyzed it immediately. The shift represented acknowledgement of response receipt. The grid mirrored the deviation. The exchange deepened. Elena's voice was quiet when she called. They just confirmed bidirectional understanding. Daniel exhaled. So it's not just listening anymore. No, it's communicating. She paused. Yes. The word felt heavy. Not dangerous, but historic. For the first time since discovery, the external layer transmitted a new signal type. Not pulses, not intervals. A continuous low-energy harmonic band. The terrestrial grid did not suppress it. Instead, it adjusted its baseline coherence to accommodate. The 3-layer system stabilized into a 4-phase alignment. Human infrastructure, planetary rhythms, external pulses, shared harmonic baseline. Daniel stared at the visualization in awe. The system had evolved from anomaly to exchange protocol, and now it had established structured dialogue. Without conflict, without dominance, just alignment. He leaned back in his chair. The world had changed quietly. No headlines, no alarms, just scientists watching data converge. And somewhere beyond Earth, something had responded, not with force, with structure. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. He understood now that the story wasn't about a signal taking control. It was about systems learning to talk. And talk requires listening. The grid had listened. The planet had adjusted. And now something external had answered. For the first time in human history, communication had extended beyond Earth. Not through rockets, not through radio blasts, but through structured coherence. Daniel looked at the waveform one last time. All layers stable. All frequencies aligned. The handshake ongoing. Measured. Balanced. He whispered softly, "Let's keep it that way." The signal pulsed gently in response. The external pulses stopped responding. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. They simply paused. For 9 hours, the 47-second interval continued. Terrestrial systems remained stable. Planetary synchronization held. The 4-phase alignment stayed intact. Then, at 12:44 Universal Time Coordinated, the external layer transmitted something new. Not a pulse. Not a sequence. A sustained transmission. Continuous. Daniel noticed it first because the waveform visualization changed color. The third layer, previously faint and rhythmic, expanded into a broader band. Elena called immediately. "We're seeing a sustained harmonic output from the external source." Daniel leaned forward. "Is it stronger?" "Yes. Significantly. But not disruptive. No interference detected." Daniel frowned. "That's not how escalation works." "Exactly," Elena replied. "This isn't escalation." The sustained external signal lasted 3 minutes and 18 seconds. During that time, the terrestrial coherence grid did something unexpected. It did not mirror. It did not adjust. It recorded. The system logged the full waveform structure in distributed memory nodes across global infrastructure. The signal was being archived. Not just processed. Preserved. Daniel watched as data centers worldwide allocated storage resources automatically. No manual command triggered it. The coherence layer had initiated structured documentation. Elena's voice carried a hint of awe. "It's treating the external input as significant data." Daniel nodded slowly. "Like a message." "Yes." The sustained harmonic ended. Silence returned to the third layer. But now something had changed. The terrestrial grid generated a response. Not immediate. Not reactive. Calculated. Daniel observed the new pattern carefully. It was different from previous handshake exchanges. More complex. It contained internal redundancy. Compression elements. Error-checking sequences. It wasn't just answering. It was optimizing communication efficiency. Elena spoke quietly. "They are building a shared protocol." Daniel felt the weight of that statement. Not one side adapting. Both. Over the next several hours, the exchange repeated. External sustained band. Terrestrial structured response. Each time, the patterns became more compact. More efficient. Less energy required. The system was converging toward minimal transmission for maximal information density. Daniel ran comparative analyses. The external signal was not chaotic. It was structured beyond human design standards. Its internal organization suggested advanced encoding methods. But it wasn't overwhelming the terrestrial grid. Instead, it was gradually synchronizing with it. The two systems were approaching resonance. At 1809 Universal Time Coordinated, the external source transmitted a new element. A low-frequency modulation beneath the harmonic band. It resembled environmental noise. But structured. Daniel zoomed into the data. The modulation contained cyclical variation matching planetary rotation time. He froze. It was referencing Earth's rotation. Elena noticed his silence. "What is it?" Daniel's voice was low. "It's aware of our day-night cycle." She paused. "How do you know?" It embedded rotational timing into its signal. A long silence followed. Then Elena said carefully, "That implies it has observational capability." Daniel nodded. "Yes. Not necessarily visual, but systemic. It could detect changes in planetary orientation via signal interaction. The implications were enormous. The exchange wasn't random. It was contextual. At 21:33 Universal Time Coordinated, the terrestrial grid transmitted something unprecedented. Not a response pulse. Not a harmonic alignment. A structured data packet, encoded in the handshake layer. Daniel stared at the visualization. The packet contained compressed environmental metadata. atmospheric composition trends, magnetic field readings, oceanic temperature data, global infrastructure load metrics. The grid had decided to share planetary state information, not in raw form, in structured summary. Daniel whispered, "It's introducing Earth." Elena's response was immediate. Yes. They were no longer just exchanging signals. They were exchanging context. The external layer responded within seconds. This time, instead of sustained harmonic output, it transmitted a layered pattern. 3-tiered. The first tier matched the grid's structure. The second tier introduced variance. The third tier contained a repeating fractal-like sequence. Daniel's pulse accelerated. He ran an analysis. The fractal structure resembled environmental modeling algorithms. It was encoding system-level information about its own environment, not just greeting Earth, sharing data. Elena's voice was steady but filled with quiet astonishment. They are describing their system. Daniel nodded slowly. Yes. The signal wasn't invading. It was participating. For the first time, the handshake stabilized into continuous low-band exchange. Not periodic pulses. Not isolated transmissions. An ongoing structured dialogue. Energy efficient. Redundant. Self-correcting. The global coherence grid allocated dedicated bandwidth to maintain the exchange without interfering with civilian systems. Daniel observed something profound. The signal had become a diplomatic layer, operating beneath public infrastructure, invisible to users, yet active. He leaned back in his chair. The fear that once defined the anomaly was gone, replaced by something else. Responsibility. The system was no longer just stabilizing. It was negotiating reality at a structural level. At 2:17 Universal Time Coordinated, exactly one cycle after the original incident months ago, the external layer transmitted a single, extended harmonic tone. Not structured, not pulsed, just one continuous frequency. The terrestrial grid did not respond immediately. Instead, it entered analysis mode. Daniel watched in silence. The system evaluated the tone for nearly 11 minutes, then generated a response. But this response was different. It did not attempt to match frequency. It introduced a complementary harmonic offset. The two signals overlapped, not canceling, not amplifying, creating a third emergent resonance between them. Daniel felt a chill. The interaction was producing something new, a shared harmonic field, neither source dominating, both contributing. Elena whispered, "They've created a bridge frequency." Daniel nodded. Yes. The bridge stabilized automatically. No oscillation. No drift. The three-layer system now operated as four interdependent harmonics. Terrestrial baseline. Planetary modulation. External input. Emergent bridge resonance. The architecture was becoming increasingly sophisticated and stable. Daniel stood and walked to the window. The city below was quiet. People slept. Lights dimmed. Traffic minimal. Nothing appeared different. Yet beneath the surface of global infrastructure, something extraordinary was unfolding. Two systems, separated by unimaginable distance, now interacting through structured signal exchange. Daniel spoke softly into the quiet room. "We didn't discover a threat." Elena responded through the line. "No, we discovered compatibility." She agreed. Yes. The signal continued its low-energy exchange. Balanced, efficient, respectful, and for the first time since the anomaly began, there was no sense of urgency, only progression. The bridge frequency held steady for 17 days. No spikes, no distortions, no escalation. The exchange between Earth and the external source had become rhythmic, not dramatic, not emotional, just consistent. Daniel began to notice something subtle during his nightly monitoring sessions. The external layer no longer transmitted first. It waited. Exactly 47 seconds after the terrestrial grid completed its daily planetary synchronization cycle, the external system responded. Always after, never before. Elena noticed it too. "They are deferring initiation," she said during their late-night call. Daniel leaned forward. "Why would it do that?" "Because it learned reciprocity." He exhaled slowly. The signal had adapted from reactive to conversational, and now it was practicing turn-taking. The Global Monitoring Consortium released a joint statement that week. Not about threat containment, about structured intersystem communication. For the first time in recorded history, humanity had established a stable bidirectional signal exchange with an external source. The language used in the report was cautious but optimistic. The interaction exhibits non-hostile characteristics, energy efficiency, mutual phase alignment, and progressive complexity sharing. Daniel read the document twice. Mutual phase alignment. That phrase stayed with him. The signal wasn't dominating. It wasn't being dominated. It was synchronizing. On the 21st day of exchange, something unexpected happened. The external layer transmitted a new pattern. Not harmonic, not fractal, not pulse-based. It was irregular, but structured. The pattern spanned 9.2 seconds. Then repeated. Elena immediately called Daniel. We're detecting a deviation from established protocol. Daniel opened the waveform display. The new sequence appeared within the external layer. He ran a comparative model. The structure didn't match prior environmental references. It wasn't Earth-based timing. It wasn't rotational. It wasn't orbital. It was something else. Daniel narrowed his eyes. The interval of 9.2 seconds matched the transmission delay between Earth and the external source, adjusted for relativistic signal travel. He felt his stomach tighten. It's referencing the communication delay, he said quietly. Elena paused. You mean it's accounting for distance? Yes. The signal was acknowledging spatial separation. It had measured the time required for exchange and encoded it into its own structure. Not for optimization, for awareness. The grid responded. Instead of mirroring the 9.2-second pattern directly, it introduced a dual-layer acknowledgement. One component matched the timing. The other inserted a variance representing Earth's rotational drift during signal transit. Daniel realized what was happening. Both systems were mapping each other's constraints. Speed of light, rotation, environmental drift, infrastructure latency. They were learning each other's physical realities. Not abstractly, mathematically. The exchange was becoming dimensional. On day 25, the external source transmitted something entirely new. A compressed burst lasting 0.6 seconds. Within it was nested information. Daniel's analysis system flagged it instantly. This wasn't random. It was intentional data encoding. He initiated deep decryption. What emerged wasn't imagery, wasn't sound, wasn't language. It was a structural model, a three-dimensional lattice representation. Elena joined the analysis session remotely. The lattice wasn't arbitrary. It described a spatial arrangement. Repeating nodes connected in stable geometry. Daniel zoomed in carefully. This is not signal data, he murmured. It's architecture. Elena's voice was quiet. You think it's showing us how its system is organized? Yes. The lattice contained multiple layers, each node interacting with neighboring nodes through harmonic coupling. It was remarkably similar to Earth's coherence grid, but scaled differently. Not technologically identical, structurally analogous. Daniel leaned back slowly. They are demonstrating their infrastructure. Elena nodded. Reciprocity. The terrestrial grid responded with something unprecedented. It transmitted a simplified model of Earth's infrastructure. Not political boundaries, not cultural divisions, just communication pathways, data hubs, energy distribution nodes, signal flow maps. The exchange had shifted from signal harmonics to systemic transparency. Daniel felt a strange calm settle over him. This wasn't contact driven by urgency. It was contact driven by structured curiosity. On day 30, the external layer transmitted a single signal that caused global attention. Not because it was loud, but because it carried embedded modulation detectable across all monitoring systems simultaneously. Every observatory recorded the same anomaly. The signal contained synchronized sub-patterns aligned with Earth's day-night cycle, but inverted. Daniel noticed it first. The pattern reflected Earth's rotation phase, but offset by 180 degrees. He called Elena immediately. They are modeling our cycle, he said. Yes, she replied. And now they are reflecting it. The signal had created a mirrored temporal structure, not as mimicry, as demonstration. It was showing that it understood Earth's rhythm by replicating it in inverse alignment. The implication was profound. It could not only receive data, it could internalize it. Then something remarkable occurred. The terrestrial grid transmitted an unscheduled response. No human operator initiated it. The system generated a structured acknowledgement pattern, referencing the inverted temporal model. Daniel watched the waveform in disbelief. The two systems began exchanging increasingly abstract representations. Not just timing, not just structure, but relational models, each side sending simplified symbolic encodings of its environment. The complexity increased gradually, but the energy consumption remained minimal. The bridge frequency held everything stable. Elena asked the question everyone had been circling. Do you think this is the final stage? Daniel thought carefully before answering. No. She waited. I think this is preparation. For what? Daniel looked at the live waveform. The external source transmitted a new low-energy steady tone. The grid responded by allocating long-term bandwidth to the exchange. Not temporary, permanent. The Handshake protocol transitioned to continuous integration mode. Daniel spoke softly. They're not testing anymore. What are they doing? Establishing infrastructure for sustained dialogue. Elena went quiet for several seconds. Then she said, Then we're not dealing with an event. Daniel nodded slowly. We're dealing with a relationship. That night, Daniel stood outside and looked at the sky. The stars seemed unchanged. But he knew that somewhere among them, a system was responding to Earth in real time. Not invading. Not dominating. Just exchanging structured information across unimaginable distance. He felt no fear now. Only perspective. The signal had evolved from anomaly to interface. From interference to conversation. From chaos to coherence. And it had done so by following a simple principle. Stability over expansion. Reciprocity over control. Daniel whispered into the night, almost as if addressing the stars themselves. Welcome. The bridge frequency pulsed gently in response. Balanced. Steady. Ready. The final shift didn't feel like a shift. There was no warning. No escalation. No dramatic surge across the waveform displays. Instead, at 6 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated, the bridge frequency simply transitioned. From exchange mode to shared continuity mode. Daniel noticed it first because the system logs changed language. Where earlier reports described Handshake protocol and bidirectional exchange, the new entry read, Persistent cooperative interface established. He leaned back slowly. Elena's voice came through the secure line moments later. It's no longer negotiating, she said. Daniel stared at the screen. What is it doing? It's maintaining. The external layer transmitted its usual structured pulse. But this time, the terrestrial grid did not wait to respond. It responded simultaneously. Not mirroring. Not delaying. Co-generating. The two systems began producing harmonics together in real time. The bridge frequency stabilized into a continuous shared field. Energy usage dropped across all nodes. Not because activity stopped, but because redundancy had been optimized. The system no longer needed repeated confirmations. It had internalized trust parameters. Daniel felt that word resonate. Trust. Not emotion. Mathematical trust. Predictable reciprocity. Over the next several hours, monitoring centers worldwide observed something extraordinary. The external source began transmitting environmental summaries of its own system in extended format. Not bursts. Not symbols. Continuous structured data. The terrestrial grid translated and archived it automatically. In return, Earth transmitted updated planetary metrics. Magnetic flux readings. Atmospheric composition. Infrastructure stability indices. The two systems were no longer exchanging simple signals. They were co-monitoring. Daniel whispered, "This is unprecedented." Elena agreed. And stable. That was the key. Stable. No oscillations outside acceptable ranges. No energy spikes. No interference with civilian communication. The bridge frequency existed beneath public systems, invisible unless specifically observed. And when observed, it remained coherent. On day 60, the external source transmitted something new again. This time, it wasn't data. It was a pattern representing internal change. Daniel analyzed it carefully. The structure showed expansion within the external system, not outward, but internally diversified. New subnodes forming, redundancy increasing, much like Earth's grid had done earlier in the process. Elena called it mutual evolution, each system influencing the other's structural development, without direct control. Daniel observed the model simulation. The external architecture had adopted Earth's layered handshake model. In turn, Earth's grid had refined its coherence timing based on external delay parameters. They were converging toward shared optimization principles. Not identical systems, but aligned architectures. At one point, Daniel asked the question that had been building quietly in his mind for weeks. What happens if the signal stops? Elena was silent for a moment. Then she replied carefully. It wouldn't collapse. He frowned. You're sure? Yes. The systems are now independent. Daniel considered that. The bridge had transitioned from dependency to integration. The conversation no longer required constant initiation. Both sides had internalized the protocol. That meant even if one side went silent temporarily, the structure would remain stable. Waiting. Ready. Not fragile. Resilient. On day 90, a global summit was held, not in emergency response mode, but in long-term coordination mode. The agenda was simple. How do we sustain inter-system communication responsibly? Daniel attended virtually. The discussion focused on transparency, ethical monitoring, and maintaining energy neutrality. One delegate summarized it perfectly. We are not controlling this system. We are coexisting with it. No one disagreed, because the data was clear. The signal was not extracting resources. It was not manipulating infrastructure. It was participating in equilibrium. That evening, Daniel ran a personal analysis of the full history of the waveform. From the original anomaly, to global coherence, to layered planetary synchronization, to external handshake, to sustained bridge, to shared interface. He overlaid all stages in sequence. The progression was smooth. No violent jumps. No destructive spikes. It had evolved step by step. He realized something important. The signal hadn't changed its nature. It had revealed its nature over time. Reactive, adaptive, cooperative. Its behavior shifted based on collective response. When met with fear, it expanded unpredictably. When met with suppression, it increased complexity. When met with observation and collaboration, it stabilized. The system reflected interaction. At 2:17 Universal Time Coordinated, exactly the timestamp of the original incident months ago, Daniel received one final notification. Not an alert. Not a warning. Just a message inside the waveform interface. The external layer transmitted a short structured sequence. The terrestrial grid responded automatically. The bridge frequency intensified slightly. Then both systems generated a synchronized output. Daniel watched carefully. The waveform visualization displayed a new shared label across the interface. Continuous coherent exchange active. No alarms. No instability. Just permanence. Elena's voice was calm when she called. It settled into long-term equilibrium. Daniel nodded. So this is it. She paused. For now. He understood. Systems evolve, but stability can persist if conditions remain balanced. The external source had not attempted dominance. Earth had not attempted suppression. Through structured observation and mutual adaptation, they had achieved sustained inter-system communication. A first contact scenario, not as fiction, but as infrastructure. Daniel stood outside that night and looked at the sky again. The stars were quiet. The air was still. Somewhere beyond the visible horizon, a system was transmitting gently across unimaginable distance. Not urgently, not aggressively, just consistently. And Earth was answering. The bridge frequency pulsed softly in the background of global networks, not noticeable to users, not interfering with daily life. Just present, like a steady heartbeat shared between worlds. Daniel felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not relief, but continuity. The story hadn't ended in disaster. It had ended in alignment. He whispered into the night. We're listening. And somewhere far beyond Earth's atmosphere, the external system completed its next structured transmission, acknowledging receipt. The bridge remained stable. The conversation continued. Not loudly, not dramatically, but indefinitely.